Okay. Well, it looks like we are live on YouTube. Very good. Okay, so thanks for your patience, everybody. Tonight we have a really, I think, exciting topic. It's a topic that's sort of near and dear to my heart, but it's not a topic that we as an organization have touched on very often. And so I'm glad we have a chance to bring a real expert in this area to join us tonight, and that's Jeff Sagara. The topic is recruiting men as early childhood educators. And Jeff, it's a particular pleasure to welcome you to our cafe webinar series. I know Jeff, I suppose personally, he being the instructor for my daughter at a daycare in Toronto, a very special daycare, special for many reasons, but in particular relevant for tonight's event because three of their four permanent staff are male early childhood educators. And I know when I was looking for a daycare for my daughter, we went on tours of many, many daycares, and I don't remember any of them having any male staff. So to find a daycare that has 75% of its permanent staff male is truly extraordinary. So I think he's the right person to have with us on this particular topic. The schedule for today is going to be I will finish my introduction mercifully quickly. Then we will go to Jeff for 15 to 20 minutes of his prepared remarks. I'm going to then turn to Q&A. So we will go to Q&A a little bit earlier than we usually do. I probably will ask a few leading questions to get a conversation started. And then we're going to count on all of you to engage with us in a stimulating discussion tonight. So thanks for signing on for that. And then we will conclude things by 9 or 9:15, somewhere around 9 o'clock. As I usually do, I want to remind you of the programs and services that the Canadian Centre for Men and Families offers. Most excitingly, we've just in the last 3 months opened Toronto's first family shelter for male identified survivors of domestic abuse and family violence. So this is available now to both single men and fathers with children. It's in northern Toronto. It has no real catchment area, so if you can get to the shelter, if you need access to it, it is available to you. You can visit menandfamilies.org/family shelter to learn more about the residence and its amenities and to register for services. For non-residential programs or usual mental health and social services, which are currently all being offered online at the present time, you go to menandfamilies.org/online programs. At some point, I'll get around to putting all that into the chat bar. So with that, let me introduce the topic and then Jeff. Well, the reason why this is important is because as an organization that values gender equality and healthy families, we believe it's important that children enjoy the benefit of having role models of both genders. And as we know, a large percentage of marriages end in divorce, yet something like 80% of lone parent families are led by mothers in the event of a separation or divorce. So where do you find positive male role models? Well, it could be very likely within the school system. And yet at the earliest grades, and in particular among early childhood educators, the percentage of ECEs who are male stands at about 3%, and that number hasn't changed much in the last couple of decades. There are currently no major efforts we're aware of underway to change that to recruit or retain men into the ECE profession. And so tonight's presentation is particularly important. We're going to look at the challenges and barriers faced by men in entering and staying in the ECE profession. And we're going to look at positive solutions, tips, and ideas for recruiting men, breaking down those barriers so that we can have more gender equality in this really critical professional domain. We're joined by Jeff Sagara, who is a registered early childhood educator. He's also co-supervisor at Friends Daycare in Toronto. He's worked in this profession for 20 years, and as I indicated, Friends Daycare is rather unique given its high percentage of male ECE professionals working there. So I want you to join me in giving a silent round of applause. I guess I'll be the only one actually that you'll be able to hear, Jeff. But there's other people on the line, I guarantee you that. But please help me in joining in welcoming Jeff tonight. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
The floor is yours.
I'd like to thank Justin too to bring this to everyone here. This is the first time I've ever been approached to do something like this, so it's definitely sort of a groundbreaking type of thing. I'm just going to cover a couple areas tonight, and then, like Justin said, we'll take some he may ask some questions, and we may do some questions and answers after. So I'm going to cover my personal journey first, and then what motivated to be an ECE, and then also the possible barriers that I've encountered throughout my 26 years of working in the field. So I'll just start off by talking about my upbringing. I grew up youngest of three children. I have one older sister who is 8 years older, and another one that was 10 years older, and unfortunately she passed away through an accident several years ago. My parents are 91 and 87 and have always been very kind, gentle, and respectful to me and everyone that I've known. I still feel very fortunate to have them around at this point in my life. Academically, I was a C student until I reached college, where I excelled and became an A student. It was funny though, when I was in college, the amount of support by my students and by the staff was very overwhelming. So when I think back to my academics in school, including public school, junior high, and high school, the most support and the area where I accelerated academically was definitely in college. That's where I got most of my confidence in school. I found that I was able to do well on projects then, whereas in the past, that definitely was not my forte. It was definitely out of my character to take lead with assignments and projects, but that changed in college. And after college, or during college, I also worked at several other centers, which is required when you take the course of early childhood education. My final placement ended up being in the present center that I'm at. And leading into that center, working at the center, when I first started, I worked with three other coworkers that had been in the field for 20 years. So they helped guide me for about 6 or 7 years before eventually they left my center. Well, I've been at the center ever since 1995. I guess my motivation to be an EC was, when I think back to what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to play baseball or hockey. I wanted to play sports. It wasn't very practical thinking. When I finished high school, I worked in a local hospital in a mailroom, and I worked with a lot of grumpy people that did not like their jobs. So I can remember talking to a friend saying, I cannot do this for the rest of my life, hearing these people talk the way they do, being so negative about things. I like to think I was always a very positive person. So that led to talking to my best friend, actually, since I was 6. His name is Joe. And he knew that I enjoyed child sitting. I had a lot of younger cousins. I enjoyed that. So he suggested taking that course in college. Before I took that in college, though, I volunteered at my former public school to see if that was something that I may enjoy, which in turn, shortly after that, I applied for college, took it for 2 years. The amount of support, like I said, in college was unbelievable as far as a few teachers in particular go. I still remember their names, even though it's 26 years ago. One was Kathy Cotard, and the other one was Sheila Sullivan. They were so supportive of the males in the class. We had 3 males out of 60 in the program then. I believe the other 2 are no longer in the field, but again, that was 26 years ago too. But I never found that a barrier at all in college, being male. Sorry, I'm just reading over my notes here a little bit more. And when I think back to telling my family and friends that I was taking this course and when I eventually ended up in the field too, no one seemed very shocked. I think I was probably the most shocked person when I think back that I was able to get into the field, be successful for as long as I've been in the field too. That's not to say there haven't been challenging times in the past too. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but just reading over my notes, so bear with me, please, as this is the first Zoom type of thing I've done with anyone talking about myself, which I don't always enjoy doing. So, I was posed a question before, and the question was, how often do we consider childcare to be a field for women, and how do you manage to bring to light the importance of males in the field? And as much as I am a male, I have never thought of it being a challenge of being a male in the field. I've always emphasized that there's nothing I wouldn't ask my staff to do that I wouldn't do myself, whether they're male or female. I guess some of the things that I've encountered in the past when it comes to barriers are, we do work with a few neighborhood shelters, and some of the things that have come up in the past where some of the females have encountered violence with their past males, and I'm the next male that they've met after that. And I have had people say to me, I don't like males. That's the first thing one parent said to me. And, all I could say was, I'm sorry you feel that way. And I hope that I can change your perspective on things, but not all males are the same. It seems very simple to say that too, but a lot of times the feedback parents will get will be from their children, the positive feedback, the negative feedback. So when I've been asked, what influence we have or I have on children, it's a very difficult question to ask, but the best feedback that parents will get from are from their children in general, asking, telling things that they've done at daycare or at school. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, being 26 years in the field, I'm not going to say it's all been easy, but the thing about being in this field that I'm in is that we do get a lot of thank yous. We do get a lot of gracious parents too. And you can't say that for every job that you're going to get that type of feedback. So I really do appreciate that from parents when they do give us that type of feedback and connection and gratitude to. So some of the barriers that I've encountered, like I mentioned about the shelters in the past, I do go to some meetings with other supervisors. It's been a little while, but when I have, quite often I am the only male there. But given the fact I've been dealing with that for 26 years, that's pretty normal and easy for me to deal with. Originally when I got into the field, I enjoyed playing with children. I got into the field to be with the children, to play with them. I didn't want to talk to adults. I didn't enjoy that perspective. As I've gotten more experienced and older, I really don't prefer that part of the field. I prefer to be with the children and interact with the children. So I don't really know what more to say. If you have any input, Justin, or any questions or anything to lead into anything, I don't mind answering them too.
Okay. Well, thanks for opening that discussion up, Jeff. I appreciate that, and your soft-spoken approach to these potentially provocative topics.
Mhm.
You talked a little bit about some of the potentially kind of suspicion or even hostility that you faced, albeit only in a couple of instances, which is good news that it's not a common thing. Or do you have you had the chance to interact with other men in the EC profession over the course of your, what is it, 26-year career?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't. I mean, when I go to these network meetings, we sort of we sit together, but we're just sitting randomly at different tables. So it's not like I gravitate to the males at
Mhm.
the other centers, or there are people that I'm familiar with in the area that are supervisors at a daycare. So quite typically, that's the way we gravitate to each other. So when it comes to guiding men towards being an EC and whatnot, I say that's a challenge in some sense, but I mean, if you have a passion or interest in early childhood education, my experience in school was very positive. There was never any negative feedback. I found the teachers probably overly helpful towards the 3 males that we had in our program, just because the numbers, pure numbers, right? But I mean, I will say that prior to college, I lacked a lot of confidence. I didn't enjoy speaking in front of people. I still don't enjoy that perspective too, but it's given me a lot of confidence in a lot of different ways besides my workplace too, in my relationship with my wife, in my sports too. It's just, I know I've been in the field for 26 years, but those first few years, it really helped me through a lot too. The burnout rate in the early childhood education field is very high too. Like I found out of the 60 students that I went to school with, in that first year, people getting jobs, maybe half of them just totally switched their field. They couldn't deal with it. So, if you do get into the field, you really have to think ahead and not think short term, and, try to fight through that first year of sort of burnout, of being exhausted, of talking all day, and then having to deal with going home and dealing with family to talk with, or maybe your own family, kids. That was quite a challenge at the beginning.
You sort of want to pace yourself and be like a marathon runner.
Yeah, but when you're pacing yourself at work, it's like go, 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 go. And then, sometimes people have to go, go, go when they get home too. So
Well, that was actually going to be my next question, and it wasn't necessarily only a gendered question, but
mhm.
partly it is, which is what kept you in the profession. I didn't realize how many people burnt out of it so quickly, but knowing that, now I'm even more intrigued. Like, what was it about your approach or your personality or temperament, or were there other kind of incentives in your life that kept you going, still keeping you going in that space?
I was young then. I had a family to go home to. I lived with my parents, but my parents were very patient. So, when I went home and said, I don't want to talk anymore, they really adhered to my statements. Like my mom is a talker, and I would go home and she'd just sort of like, hey, how was your day? And I'd be like, I can't talk. I'm just totally exhausted. So, I guess my parents they've always been very supportive to hear what I want to do, and supported me indirectly or directly. My dad wanted me to be an engineer, but there's no way I could be an engineer. No way. I don't have the mind of an engineer, but he's happy. They're happy with the way my life has gone. So
Just before we get into it further, we do have a question from Lewis asking, does EC refer just to pre-public schools?
pre-public schools. What would you mean by
I,
pre-public
I think,
schools?
Lewis, you're asking, does it refer to pre-grade school? Like anything before?
Yeah, so in general, I guess an ECE would be, well, no, they can work in before and after school programs, but in general, ECEs are early childhood educators in the school system, kindergarten or younger.
Okay. So I do have a few more questions. I'll
Yeah.
keep asking them if others don't want to jump in. But at this point, anybody who wants to either put their hand up and ask a question verbally, or if you'd prefer to ask it by chat, we do encourage you to speak up, because we want to have more interaction that way. But I can read your question if you want to put it into a chat. While I'm waiting on that, I guess one thing on my mind, and again, not so much on the gender aspect, but it's just, what's been the most rewarding experience that you've had, or kind of experience that you have as an ECE?
There are a lot. I mean, I've appreciated the last, how long has it been? Geez, the last 17 years I work with Lorna. She's my co-supervisor at the center too. So, um, very supportive, very much in tune with my way of thinking too. When you work in a small group of staff, you have to be able to work as a team. You have to be able to feed off each other. there are going to be arguments, but you have to be able to sort of get over those disagreements and work together with, the program and the children's best interest in mind too. So, she's a big reason I'm still there in some sense. When she started working, I had just lost my three senior staff members that had worked there for over 20 years. They gradually left, and then I got filled in with newer people that, some of them didn't mesh with our belief, and some of them did. I mean, the one philosophy I've always had, like I think I said earlier, is that there's nothing I would never ask my staff to do that I wouldn't do myself. And, we share the duties, saying hi and bye to our parents. I think it's good if the parents meet all the staff, not just the supervisors. And I mean, that's not typical of our center is not a typical center in a sense where typically when you go to daycare centers, you meet the supervisors, and they only show you around and they cover breaks. But Lauren and I at my center, and we've created that too, we share the administration, but we also spend a lot of our time in program too. So that makes a big difference when, you meet people, you get to see who the people are in program, but also the people that are showing you around are the same people sometimes too.
Right, right. So there was an article that ran in 2013. I brought it up if anybody wants to peruse it as we talk. It was in the Toronto Star, and it was titled "Men Stand Out as Daycare Workers." And this is what first sort of turned my mind back in 2013 to this issue. And it sort of at a systematic or policy level mirrors what you're saying at a personal level, which is you didn't face any direct barriers and people were very sort of welcoming to you. However, there hasn't really been an active recruitment effort to proactively go out and get men into the sector. And what struck me in this article was how the folks that are in positions of, not sure what you'd call it, I guess, the folks behind the regulatory body for the college of that the EC professionals sort of report to, they're aware of the numbers, but they basically said in the article, if people aren't applying, then they're not being hired. They're just basically not there to fill those roles. The men aren't. And they seem to just accept that was the way it was. And I guess this is a question that is more, I guess, at the policy level, but I'm wondering if you have a position on it. Do you think that the EC profession really owes it to the public and to the parents that it sort of is working on behalf of to actually actively recruit more men? The argument would be, and I said this earlier when I introduced you, we need desperately to have healthy role models of all genders. And given how many children are living in lone parent families, typically with a mother, and this is not a slight to mothers at all. It's just that they're not going to get that positive male role model from, well, it's pretty limited from where they can get it. One of the obvious places would be in the daycares and in school. And so is it not kind of the responsibility, I guess, of folks who have some influence in the EC profession to go out of their way, I guess, to try to get more men into the EC world? Is that something
Yeah,
you've thought about over the years? Do you have a kind of a
I
position?
would I would guess though, like if you're gonna lead that way towards, trying to get more men into the EC field, I think that starts prior to college, right? That has to be like in high school when people are making decisions what they're going to be doing then. Like I remember going to a counselor's office in high school, and that was I don't, that was never brought up during my meetings and everything. Oh, as a business school I went to, you're going to do this for business or this. So, I mean, maybe times have changed now. I would assume they would have, but I mean, where is that opportunity going to be, I guess, in that office of that counselor to, direct someone. You have to know a person's personality really well to see what they're good at, and several things in order to be in this field. You need to have patience. Number one, you need to have drive. You need to be outgoing. Ideally, I wasn't outgoing ideally, but it did change over a period of time. But that's a tough question because I mean, it doesn't seem like things have changed. Since I've been in the field for 26 years, it doesn't seem like men are not getting into the field yet, right? It hasn't changed in that period of time. So,
And I totally agree that it's got to start early on. In my
Yep.
opinion, we've already lost the battle when we socialize boys and girls differently before the ages of 5, which is
Oh, for
brings it kind of
sure.
back to your space, right? Because that's
Yeah.
the age that you work with.
Yeah.
If we're not starting there, then by the time they're in college or even high school, certainly senior high school, it's kind of late in the game, right? We've
Right.
got some questions coming in, but nobody's put their hand up. I would really rather that people ask the questions directly of Jeff than that I just read them all out because you guys hear enough from me on a day-to-day basis. So we've got Laura here. Okay, thank you, Laura, for breaking the ice. Let's bring Laura into this. Laura, you should have
Hi
permission
there.
to talk
Can you hear me?
granted. Go ahead with your question, please.
I was just wondering, and not a easy question to answer, but Jeff, if you'd be willing to speculate on what are the conditions that need to change in order to make the sector feel more accessible to men?
I wish I had a grasp on that when I talk to other males in the field, but really, like, I'm sort of the males in the field I know are the ones that I work with. And I mean, the one senior male, the two that I work with, he started out initially as just an assistant, and then we encouraged him to take the part-time program while he was at our center to become an EC. So that's the way he did it that way. But unless he would have had that type of opportunity, he probably wouldn't have been led in that direction. Um, so it's I wish I had an answer for that, but I really don't. I mean, it's got to start early, like earlier on when they have that choice, back in high school to, take this or that or what they're good at. And, I'm sure now they have a sort of different baseline to lead, students in a different direction towards what they're good at and what courses they're good at too. But I have had the opportunity to have a couple male staff volunteer at my center, and I could see how they'd have been good in the field, but they decided not to do it. So, I wasn't forcing them, but I was giving them suggestions that you'd be good at this, and for whatever reason, they didn't tend to gravitate to it. So.
Thanks, Jeff. Laura, did you have a follow-up on that?
Just to say thank you, and I agree with what both of you have said about the need for change in how even very young children are socialized into stereotypical gender roles. So thank you for that. I was very excited to hear that comment. So thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we've got some questions coming in. Once again, does anybody want to join us and ask Jeff directly? Going once, going twice. Okay, I'll read the next question then. But I think it's from Lewis, who asks, shortly before the appearance of the pandemic, the federal government began a campaign to get men to promote equality. It might be worthwhile to see if that campaign would have funds to get more men in ECE. Yes, I'm not sure, Jeff, if you're aware of that or want to comment on that, or it could just stand as a comment, but
I just
from
read
Lewis,
that, but I was not aware of that. But yeah, that would be a great way to promote it. I mean, no matter what, funds make a difference for um, the initial startup of people's interest sometimes too. There wasn't a need for that when I was in school, but I see the next question too, what the average salaries are too. I would say as an EC, you may start out in the high teens. And then there are, depending on your center too, you also get funding from the government to raise your fees slightly too, or your salaries, I should say, slightly too. So, I've always thought like, oh, I'm 26 years, I could have worked at a city center. But I'm happy where I am, and I would be making more money at a city center. But again, I'm happy where I am in the setting that I am at too. And I don't know if it would have lasted that long in a unionized atmosphere, which I'm not in, of course. So.
right, right. Yeah, the question about pay, I mean, this often comes up because when we talk about or when we kind of agitate around the need to bring more men into the profession and try to talk about where not so much the blame lies, but what strategies are necessary and whose responsibility it is, it's usually sort of thrown back at, in a way, blamed. Men are blamed for not seeking out the profession because they instead prefer to go into higher paying jobs. That's usually the response we get, and this rate it's a fair critique. It has limited validity.
Right.
But there's an element there that's fair, but it needs to be put into a larger context because there's a reason why, men still in 2021 feel the need to seek out the higher paying jobs, and it has to do again with how we socialize men to imagine themselves as the breadwinners and put, I think, more of the burden on men to do that, and that then leads them to decline professions which may be more rewarding in many ways, but don't pay as well. So the pay is a factor, but that larger context needs to be kept in mind.
Yeah, and
Were there
when I first started, sorry, when I first started the field, it was funny because I mean I'm a male in a female dominated field, and back then they had what was called pay equity. So we were getting funding from the government to support the females in the field, and myself not being a female, I was getting that support too. But we were getting extra funding to up the salaries to a certain point to help with being at the male level, they called it back then.
right?
So it's funny because I mean I was getting that, but I was a male. But I'm like, okay, well, that's okay, but different situation now. But I would say the salaries run between on a full-time basis, maybe 40 to 60 to 70, maybe as an EC that's been in the field for a while too. So, it's, I don't know, money is not everything too. And I've learned that in life too. It's the satisfaction of a job, and I know money's part of it, but I'd rather go home with a smile on the face than extra money in my pocket sometimes too. That's a
Exactly.
crude way to put it, but that's what I think. So
Yeah, and my last point on this is simply I'm in favor of breaking down barriers, whether
mhm,
they're externally imposed or self-imposed. And one of the self-imposed barriers is the way men take it upon themselves to conform to the stereotypical expectations of men, and women do the same
right.
as women. And that's a kind of mental barrier, if you will, which if we could break it down, men and women and folks of all genders could select the profession that was true to who they are, not who their what their gender happens to be, and
Yeah,
then
and
they can choose to
like
go where they want to go, right?
being in this field for, well, even when I started out too, the one comfort I've always had is that without the adults around, I can be as stupid and silly as I want to be with the kids because they just gravitate to that too. So I can still do that now, but that was always a saving grace for me, is I didn't have to worry about what the kids think. You know, you just enjoy the moment. That's what keeps you going in this field too. So
That that's where the reward comes in, is you get to hang
yeah,
out with these
definitely.
amazing little kids
Yeah.
all day. Yeah, I could appreciate that. So I've hogged Jeff a lot. I'm really again hoping some people will put their hands up. Come on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
I told
no,
Justin I
there are a
would.
lot of questions, Jeff. It's just that nobody wants to come out and ask them directly, so they're putting it to me to ask you, and I'm happy to do
Okay.
that. But I'd like to hear from some other people. Okay, Brad, thank you for saving me there. Let's go to Brad. All right, Brad, floor is yours.
Okay. I don't know that I'm saving you, Justin, but I just a couple comments. First, I appreciated Laura's question earlier. That was great. And Jeff, I really appreciate the really authentic presentation that you've done here tonight. And I don't really
Thank you.
have a question, but the whole idea of opening up new roles for men, I think is important. I work in the nonprofit sector myself. And I do sometimes get frustrated. I know that the workforce in that sector is statistically is 75% female. And in the role that I'm in, I get job postings from all over the place, and then typically at the end of the posting, there's some equity statements at the end of the posting, and and an organization that may already be 75% female is indicating that they're welcoming resumes from women and marginalized populations, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm all for that, but I sometimes get frustrated if there's some places, and I'm familiar with them, and I know that they have no men working in their office. But when they're putting up job postings, they're still indicating that they're welcoming resumes from women. Which is fine, but I'm thinking if we're wanting to encourage men to think about taking on other roles, perhaps we could do some things there that might make it more inviting. And I mean, so more of a comment than a question, but to say I really appreciate the discussion tonight. I began my work, my background is in social work, and I began in children's mental health. And I could have made more money working somewhere else, but Jeff, I'm with you. I thoroughly enjoyed the work that I did. It was just absolutely rewarding. And I think I'll stop talking there, but I just want to say I just really appreciated the presentation tonight.
Well, thank you for the comment. Like I have always maintained that as much as I am the person I am, the center I'm at now is the reason I'm still in this field for so long too. We're in a home style atmosphere, and I enjoy the staff that I work with, and the families. You're always going to have families that you don't disagree with, and there's nothing wrong with disagreeing too. But just a few positive comments is a lot of motivation. It goes a long way, because with a lot of jobs, you don't get that positive feedback too. So that's always been my perspective on things.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Brad, for your question. Appreciate it. And we have Michael now. Michael, bring you on. Floor is yours, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. I know you're so brave going into this, because I remember when I was in high school 30 years ago, they had a parenting class. I was in this tiny high school of 100 kids, grade 9 and up, and they integrated a kindergarten through grade 8 into it. And then they started up a parenting class. So you got several of the bunch of girls and 3 of us guys in it. And within a couple of days, I was the only guy left, because I think they were facing a lot of stigma probably.
Right.
And I toughed it out, but there was this assumption everywhere that only if the male wanted to take this, he had to be a pedophile. So I had all these eyes on me suddenly, which was not pleasant,
Yeah.
So I remember I was sitting down and chatting casually with the guidance counselor one day, and one of the grade 1s, like I should back up a bit. I ended up with half of the class, basically. Once the other guys quit, I had all of the boys, because they were so starved for a man, right? And I ended up having to juggle half the class. Almost from the beginning. And so I sort of singled out a little bit the 2 most difficult boys I could see to try to get them under control a bit. And it worked wonders. I really enjoyed that. It was sort of my vocation, because I took the class because I wanted to teach grade 1. But one time when I was sitting with the guidance counselor chatting, one of these boys just sort of ran into the room, jumped in my lap, and kissed me on the cheek. And this is so unlike anything in my previous life that I could never have predicted that. And I knew that I could never go 40 years without something that I couldn't possibly imagine happening or something, and some sort of misunderstanding. So I didn't pursue a job as a grade 1 teacher, which is similar to what you do. Just because of stigma, basically. I don't want to go 40 years with living under that, And so, but I think, the story about the sort of the parenting class that they had in my high school is maybe something you can comment on, because that might be good, but you'd have to get rid of the stigma. Because I think if I had your opinion on that class, it took me a long time to formulate this as a question rather than a story. But I guess maybe you can comment on your opinion of trying to start up programs like that more commonly.
Yeah, the startup of programs, I wouldn't know how to do that, but I will say that, given that stigma, I've always been aware of it being a male in the field. So if there's one thing I've always practiced with new families that don't know me, is I never invite the child to me in some sense, like, oh, let's come sit over here. It's a different approach than once I get to know the family, because they don't know me, and I can respect that too. Um, the stigma is still there probably with some families too, but that stigma quite often is broken down once you talk to them, once they talk to the other staff too. But that's a relevant question.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting with an adult guidance counselor in a completely separate room. I couldn't even, it wasn't like I wasn't very distanced from the children,
Right.
So things can happen.
Yeah.
And then, but whatever. But,
Yeah.
maybe.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I've got nothing more to say, basically.
When I first started out, prior to working where I'm at now, I worked at another center and I was a student there, so it turned into a part-time summer job. But I know that initially they had some issues with a parent questioning a male taking the child to the bathroom. So I wasn't allowed to take a child to the bathroom. It had to be the female parent or female staff to take the child to the bathroom too. But given that, something can happen with a female too. But again, it's different times now where that situation wouldn't happen in that sense. It'd be equality and oh boy, my doorbell just rang. That's okay. My wife will take care of it.
Well, Jeff decides whether to get the door or not. I'll take another approach to answering Michael's question about lowering the reducing the stigma, and I think part of it is actually events like this. I mean, one of the reasons why we do these sorts of events is to let the public know that there are men who are in this profession, and there's no reason to be afraid of them because they're lovely, soft-spoken gentlemen like Jeff here. We also do interviews very often with men and boys affected by things like domestic violence or parental alienation or other phenomena that people don't understand or don't believe exists, and it's so that the public becomes more accepting of these situations. So this is one thing as an agency that we can do, and that I would encourage other agencies more directly in the EC profession or other professions like it to actually showcase the good work that men are doing. So there may be other opportunities for some of you listening tonight in your circles to bring role models forward who can act as a way as ambassadors for these kinds of causes. Okay, Michael, did we address your question? Is it okay if we...
I was basically, I think I would have had more men taking that course initially if they had branded it as a teaching course, as a vocational thing rather than a parenting thing. Just before I go.
Yeah, as you're saying that too, like I said, I've had a couple students, male students, volunteer their time at my daycare center too. So, and students in their last couple years of high school, they have to volunteer some time I'm not sure exactly where they have to volunteer their time, but they have to volunteer their time and do a certain amount of community hours. So maybe that's a good opportunity for males to see what being an EC is about. But maybe they're going to encounter those possible issues too,
Oh, they will.
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
They will, because being someone who's more on the writing side and creative thinker and stuff,
right.
Going into teaching was just about the only thing that would get me. I was very good at it and had a passion for it, so it was one of the only ways to actually get a stronger income than I ever achieved.
Right.
But whatever. Anyhow, yeah, no, I think there's if you could get half of the people going into EC and the other half going into elementary school teaching, then having these programs starting in the high schools would make you better.
Yeah.
That's the key thing, I think, is anything that incentivizes or gets men thinking about these professions that men tend not to consider as possibilities. And I love the idea of placement opportunities in high school, or volunteering, or some sort of like take your kid to work day style, experience. That might be a way to at least start them thinking along those lines. Okay, thanks, Michael. I think we're going to go to some other
Sure.
hands that I
Thank
see
you.
up now.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for your great
talking.
questions. Yep. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Helena's had her hand up for some time. Let's go to Helena.
Yes. So I just wanted to oh, that's a cool picture. I just wanted to commend you for coming on and talking about ECEs, men going into that field, because there's just not enough men in that field, and it's kind of sad. I mean, I have one son who's such a wonderful guy, and I don't think it's hard for even people in their younger years, like grade school, to imagine going into the ECE field, because there's such a stigma still. It's terrible. It's too bad. As I was saying in my message earlier, I have a 12-year-old who's quite a big fellow, and he's autistic and a runner. And when I send him to school, he does. They have ECEs there, but they're all women, and I'm not saying anything bad about women, but they just don't have and I as a woman don't necessarily have the capacity to really truly help my son the way a man would be able to do it, because of their physical strength. And so it's really sad for me. I'd love to see more men in this field. So let me know what I could do to help.
Yeah, I guess even at my center, like Justin outlined, we have 3 male staff out of 4. So I guess, I'm just so used to it that I take it for granted, because, I'm on the inside, not on the outside looking in too.
Yeah, it's no, I know, no, we have to work harder to have men be able to get into this field. And
Yeah.
like you said, I think starting when they're not at the high school level, when they have to do their volunteer hours, that's probably a great time to start.
Yeah. But again, it takes the right situation too, right? You have to go in as a volunteer and have the support of the staff, rather than just sort of serving your community hours and getting it over with, right? So not an easy find though, too, to be able to find that type of ideal situation, right?
Well, I mean, one other approach, if we can't guarantee having support among the staff of every school or every daycare facility, might be an actual organization like a Men in ECE support group. We do some work with another group I'm thinking of, Men in Nursing, because that's another profession that men are underrepresented. I think it's a lot higher than 3%, which is the percentage in ECE. And I think nursing has been making gains towards gender equality of late, but there are some groups that bear names like Men in Nursing, and they do try to lower barriers and just by their very existence make clear to the public that it's acceptable for men to go into nursing. I think something like that could be really helpful in other professions where men are underrepresented, just as we would support the same for women in the STEM professions, for example, right?
Right.
One path forward. Helena, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, I think that's all I was gonna say. I just again, I would love to see some progress made in this field for men. It would be nice.
Thanks,
So
Helena.
if you think of anything that I could do to help, just let me know.
Will do.
Thanks, Helena.
And I think what everybody can do is, and it's going to sound kind of obvious and trite, I guess, but just in lots of conversations we have on a daily basis, these issues of gender equality come up. Be part of that discussion, just ever so subtly, and over the course, I'm afraid, of many years, start shifting the dialogue so people start thinking about why aren't there more men in some of these professions, and wouldn't it be nice if we had more male role models available for our youth? Okay, so I saw Dwayne had his hand up. We are going to start to wrap how should I put this? Wrap things up, I guess, over the next few questions. So I think we'll cap it at maybe 2 or 3 more questions, a combination of folks asking them verbally and me asking for those who don't want to do that. So 2 to 3 more, Jeff, and then we'll call it a night.
Yeah,
Let's
sounds
go
good.
to Dwayne next. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can, yeah.
Great. Jeff, I just want to say how much I appreciate you sharing not only a bit of your background, but also, how things have been for you of late. Long story short, when most people get a summer job during the high school years or the university years, mine was at a daycare. I started in 1994, and every summer I was just guaranteed a job at this daycare that was in a very low-income government housing community. Many of those families were single families, single parent families. And so daycare, subsidized daycare in particular, was very important for just about everyone in the neighborhood. One of the challenges that I faced, or one of the barriers that I faced early on, was much like you said, people expecting to see women working in staffs on daycares. And I think that one thing that may have helped would have been just having been introduced to parents, you know that you're starting your summer job maybe in the first week of July, having been introduced, this is our new summer student, his name is Dwayne, he'll be working with the school age program and stuff. And I often was a huge proponent of being introduced and stuff. And so I took it upon myself to just introduce myself, let them know that I'd be working in the school age program, spending time in some of the preschool programs as well. But moving forward, I spent 13 summers working in daycare, but I found that more so than people thinking that I was being nurtured and maybe even groomed to move into an ECE program.
Right.
I think people felt a bit betrayed when I decided not to go to college and pursue an ECE program, but rather I went and studied. I was a joint honors psychology and math student. So when I would come back in my university years for the summer, people didn't see me as someone that could possibly end up working here at some point. They saw me as someone who was probably just on a time limit to be, finish his post-secondary training and then move on. So I wasn't seen as someone that could have been in that field anymore. I think that one of the challenges that I faced as a young man in that field was also not having enough training around the trauma-informed component. So many of those single parent families, and especially single mother families, was as a result of some type of domestic violence, or perhaps there was some type of allegation against a father figure. And so a lot of people came into daycare and thought, wait a minute, I need to be wary of anyone who identifies as male in this field. And so I just want to throw out a little bit of my lived experience and say that I really appreciate that while we both would have started in the daycare field around the same time, you have a really great story. And I was really sour for a long time. This is a bit cathartic for me, but I still work in social work. I just still, some of those daycare kids are still in my life. They still keep in contact with me and say, Dwayne, if you ever started a daycare, I would put my kids in that program. And so I'm really glad to hear that you had more of a success story than I did. And I really appreciate you sharing it.
Oh, no problem, Dwayne. I mean, you worked at the same center for a number of years, correct?
13 years, yeah.
So was there a lot of staff turnover there, or no, not necessarily?
No, so what they did was, for the most part, they had the same senior staff, and those senior staff would often get promoted to the supervisory position. While burnout was really intense, people often took time off, almost like a sabbatical, and then they'd come back. That's probably the other thing. I don't think that there was enough emphasis on self-care throughout your day. And I know somebody threw out the idea of having people volunteer and spend time at a daycare. On the wrong day, that could be a huge barrier. Kids aren't having a good day, if the weather's not quite right,
you don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So we really have to be mindful of it's got to be people who care enough to understand that there are going to be great days and more challenging days, and then everything in between. And is that something that you're prepared for and willing to invest your time and efforts in?
Yeah, and that's the catch-22, right? To find, that's such a, I don't know how to comment on that. You do have your good days and your bad days, but if you have a bad day at work, then it could just be a total turnoff for someone in the field, just saying, you know what, I can't do this. Definitely.
I'll just we had a question by text from Laura that really dovetails nicely with where this discussion is going, because she asked, would Jeff be willing to speak about how he takes care of his own well-being in a challenging sort of professional space?
Well, this past year has definitely been a challenge with COVID. Definitely. I do have a lot of hobbies, so I do a lot of car work. I do a lot of sports too. Sports were a little bit out of the realm of possibility this past year, but I did manage to do some things too. So, self-care has been better in the past with the various snowboarding trips I do and the sports, but the last year has been more of a challenge because of COVID, as it's been a challenge for everybody. So, um, it hasn't been my favorite year of working. I'll be honest with you in my 26 years, but I have to be happy that I'm still working. I know of a lot of other centers that have actually shut down. So, through obviously unfortunate circumstances, a lot of people have had to deal with. So I have to be, thankful for that. I'm thankful that, again, our staff at work is very supportive of each other too. So, and our parents too. So that has got me through this year. So.
Awesome. I didn't mention this to you, Jeff, but there was a daycare literally next door to where I live, and they shut down
Okay. All
just
right.
like months ago. So yeah, it's real what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dwayne, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Appreciate it. I was also just going to thank Laura, who's full of really interesting questions and comments tonight. She says there's a US-based organization that has a men in ECE group. She, I think, provided the link naeyc.org. I'm not familiar with that, but you can check that out. Yep. So that is good to know. If anybody's aware of other similar organizations in Toronto, Canada, or beyond, please put those into the chat. Also a comment, I'm not sure if it's a question, but I think it's a comment from Jason. Jason, if you want to come on and speak to this directly, put your hand up so I know you're interested in doing that. But he says, I'm the 10-week Pathways to a Childcare and Early Years Career Program. I think he means he's in that program. 12 students, and I am the only male. I think people don't know what the second E is in ECE. I like working with children, but I didn't know it was educator. He didn't realize he'd be doing so much more than babysitting, he says. Okay, yes. So it is a very, very busy, challenging job.
Yeah,
Jason.
and I mean, I know that some parents I've dealt with before, they think of it in those terms too, but you can't always appreciate or have certain expectations of all your parents too. So, you have to hope that some of those parents are going to respect what you're doing, but that's never always going to be the case too. So you have to sort of fight through some of the stereotypes that parents think of. It's my center is a play-based center, and to explain play-based to someone, it's not always easy because not everyone understands what a play-based center is. Some of them think, oh, they just play all day, and like you said, babysitting too. But then there are others that truly understand the relevance of a play-based center.
Jason, the author of that comments, put his hand up, so I think we'll hear a little bit more from him, and then we're going to be wrapping up, folks. So this may be the last comment or question that we take, but let's hear from Jason.
Yes, I did not. I think if people know that ECE it's more like it's not a teacher, but it's more of a teacher than a babysitter. This might help to get more meals in the program, because it's like, okay, for babysitting it is mostly mostly females. I did some babysitting, but not only a couple children, not as much as my sister. And that if there's a small emphasis of what ECE does, that might encourage more meals.
Yeah, like when it comes to being an EC, I think the respect factor starts at the top with the staff you're going to be working with. So, if some parents are going to expect it to be, are going to refer to it as babysitting, then it is up to the people above you to sort of explain to those parents, what it's really about being an early child educator and what the center's program is about. But that being said, no matter what, you're always going to encounter some parents that have that perspective on childcare. So, you have to sort of get through it that way.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. I just said thank you, Jason, for your question. Appreciate you clarifying your earlier comment. Not seeing any hands up, so I think we've gone through the questions, and thanks everybody for a really engaging discussion. I'm glad it turned out that way. There was one last comment I'm realizing as I try to catch up from Randy. I think we've sort of covered this. He talks about mentorship and would young kids benefit from having a male presence in their lives. We've sort of commented on that, but if Jeff, if you feel like there's anything we've missed that you want to speak to on that. And his second question was, how can we spread the word if we want males in these programs? We've sort of covered this, but any sort of last words? That's kind of wrapping up the theme of the whole talk. So if there's anything we haven't yet said on this topic,
I'll just reiterate what we had talked about before, and I didn't think about it until now, but a lot of that has to start early. You think about your life choices, and you know, that goes back to the counselors in school when you're sort of deciding what you're going to be doing down the road. I think it has to start in high school there, or perhaps even earlier than that, to prepare you know, people for real life choices. You know, there's a certain point in your life where some people don't know what they're going to be doing and they need some guidance. And I was fortunate, you know, 26 years ago, 27, 28 years ago, that I was able to get some guidance from my friends that I'm very close with. And, you know, like I said, when I was in school, I found the staff there very supportive of my choices and helped me through, you know, the difficult times. So I know I reiterated that. I'm reiterating that, but you know, that's why I am where I am today. So
yeah, well, having a safe environment, whether it's family or friends or other supports, is critical. It's a nice note to sort of leave things on, because it's why we do what we do at the Center for Men and Families, is providing support spaces for boys, men, fathers, and families. So that's why we're here, and I'm really thankful that Jeff was able to join us today. Added a lot of really unique perspective as an insider, really, for 26 years actually in the DC profession. So who better to speak from within that world about what that experience is like, and giving us an access into what it's like to work with kids day in, day out. And I'm sure it's a challenge and also a huge reward, as anybody with kids would know. So thanks again, Jeff. And again, to all of you, appreciate everybody's high level of engagement and great questions tonight. This will be available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/EqualityCanadaTV. Actually, it is available right now because this was live streamed there. So you can share that link with anybody who was unable to make it today. I'm going to drop the link for the next webinar in the chat bar in just a moment. That's coming up in August. I forget the exact date. Sorry about that. It's with a columnist who writes on gender and men's issues. That's sort of his beat. So if you want to hear about the experience of a journalist covering gender issues, then you won't want to miss that August webinar event. The details, as I said, I'll pull up and put into the chat bar. But again, I really want to thank Jeff Sagara for joining us tonight. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for doing this, Jeff.
And Justin, thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. So, you know, I was very hesitant at the beginning, but I can see the value in this, not necessarily for myself, but for others too. But there is value in doing this too for my own confidence. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Have a good night, evening. Take care.